M2 Ultra Mac Studio has been out for just over 6 months now, so I figured why not revisit it, as I've been using it every single day for basically anything and everything, and I also just love to talk about it. And it's also the entire brains behind the operation back there, and I know that's a huge reason why you might be watching my videos, so I figured why not talk about it? Right now, this Mac Studio in particular is the only Mac desktop machine that I rely on, but I do also have an M1 Pro MacBook Pro as well as an M2 MacBook Air, but those have very specific use cases and don't get used nearly as much. The Mac Studio lives here at my desk. Well, technically speaking, it's actually behind the wall of my desk setup, and then I have like 2 holes in the wall to run cables through, but yeah, it lives here. It's accompanied by an LG 42C2 OLED, the Kanto Tuck bookshelf monitors, and the CalDigit TS4 Thunderbolt 4 dock. For accessories, we have a Logitech MX Master 3, a Magic Keyboard with Touch ID, and Newfie Halo 75 wireless mechanical keyboard, and also a Magic trackpad. It might also be accompanied by an Apple Vision Pro one day. Once it makes its release here in Canada, I'll definitely have to check it out and test it out, so we'll have to see. So let's break down the Mac Studio into a few different parts. We'll start off with the design, and then the functionality, the performance, and then ultimately what I think of this machine. Externally, this Mac is identical to the M1 version, and if you haven't seen the M1 version, it's basically a Mac Mini, just chunk. It doesn't take up much space on a desk whatsoever, and it looks great. I do appreciate the fact that this machine has everything internal, including the power supply, so there's just a small power cable running from the back into a wall plug. Otherwise, in terms of design, I would actually say it's kind of invisible, if that makes any sense at all, because it doesn't make a sound and it doesn't stick out if it's sitting on top of your desk, and especially because I have it hidden, I honestly forget it's even there. Functionally, the Mac Studio really can't be beat, as you can just plug in basically anything your heart desires into this thing and it's just gonna work. I love the 2 Thunderbolt ports on the front, and this one has Thunderbolt ports on the front because it's an M2 Ultra chip, and if you were happy to get an M2 Max, those are just USB-C. I use these 2 Thunderbolt ports for my working external SSDs, so I have a 1TB Samsung T7 where I store all of my working projects and files for all my social media content, and then I have a 1TB LaCie SSD for storing all of my working projects and files for all of my YouTube content. I like keeping my social content and YouTube content on separate drives, as I find it easier when it comes to file management in my Final Cut Pro project files. Additionally to those Thunderbolt ports, it also has a front SD card slot, which I've never actually used because of the whole behind the wall thing, but I'm sure it's really convenient and I love that it's there. It's definitely more useful than using a dongle or a hub. I'm looking at you, Mac Pro. And around back on this thing, we've got plenty more IO. It's got 4 more Thunderbolt ports, 2 USB-A ports, an HDMI 2.1 port, a 10 gigabit Ethernet port, and an audio jack. The 2 USB-A ports are being used by my Newfie keyboard as well as the MX Master mouse, as I have those little 2.4 GHz dongles plugged right in so that I don't have to rely on Bluetooth. Which this makes things a lot easier because my Mac kind of sees these as being directly plugged into it, so if I ever have to like restart or shut down my computer, I don't have to wait for Bluetooth to wake up or connect, it's just instantly ready to go. The Thunderbolt ports on the back are housing another external SSD for all of my backups and extra footage. My Kanto Tuck speakers, the CalDigit Thunderbolt 4, and the CalDigit TS4 is how I plug anything into the Mac Studio without actually having to physically get to it. This just makes plugging in quick accessories or mainly SD cards for offloading my footage extremely convenient and fast. The HDMI port is being taken up by my LG C2 OLED, which means I get a beautiful and color accurate 4K image at a 120Hz refresh rate, which is just amazing. It's by far my favorite thing about my setup. And lastly, the 10 gigabit Ethernet port is being used to connect directly to my router, and this is also one of my favorite things about my setup because I have a 1.5 gigabit internet connection and I can take full advantage of that speed. Needless to say, I have this Mac at like a set it and forget it state, if that makes any sense, because everything that needs to be plugged in is already plugged in, and if I need to plug in anything additionally, I just use my Thunderbolt dock, which offers pretty fast speeds. Which I think is kind of the story of the Mac Studio. Like, you just kind of set it up and you forget it's even there, you plug in anything and everything, and it's just gonna work, and it's also gonna be extremely fast. And speaking of fast, let's talk performance. In the Apple Silicon era of Macs, performance is definitely becoming more of a want and a nice to have rather than a need because these chips are just insane, especially the M2 Ultra. I reviewed the M2 MacBook Air a few months back and was so shocked with just how well that computer performed, and that was just the entry-level chip of Apple Silicon, so best believe the Ultra truly is in a league of its own. Every aspect of the M2 Ultra is just blazing fast. Like, it's so fast that I can't even generate a thought by the time it's done its task. In terms of the full spec on this machine, it's got the M2 Ultra with 24 CPU cores, 60 GPU cores, 1 terabyte of internal storage, and 64 gigabytes of unified memory, aka the RAM. And we can't forget about the media engine, which makes transcoding and exports incredibly fast. And in particular, this has hardware accelerated H.264, H.265, ProRes, and ProRes RAW. It has 2 video decode engines, 4 video encode engines, and 4 ProRes encode and decode engines, which basically means anything related to video is crazy fast. The nice thing about the media engine is that it takes the workload off of the CPU and the GPU. So if you wanted to do things like editing a bunch of photos, or you want to have like 100 Safari tabs open, or 9 windows full of your notes, or you're editing some vector files, or you're doing some coding or 3D modeling, you can do this all while you're exporting or rendering a 4K or even an 8K video in the background, which makes it kind of hard to explain my experience with this machine. Like, it's fast, it's extremely fast. It's the fastest computer I've ever used, and it's also one of the fastest computers in Apple's lineup. From video to photo to design to web browsing to brainstorming to coding to 3D modeling to motion graphics, whatever I could possibly throw at this thing, it's just gonna work, and it's all gonna do it at the same time. Now, I can admit, I'm not taking full advantage of this computer, and I probably never will, but what I can admit is I love this thing, and it's the first piece of tech that I can truly rely on. Whether that's today, tomorrow, in a couple weeks, or even in a few years, I know that the M2 Ultra Mac Studio is just gonna get the job done. Now, I'm not someone who typically fixates on gear and says you need a certain thing to accomplish something, but the Mac Studio for me is just one of those rare moments and occasions that it's truly opened up doors for me that otherwise wouldn't be available on any other machine. Actually, wait, let me rephrase this. Apple Silicon as a whole has opened up doors for not only me, but millions of other people that otherwise wouldn't be possible on any other computer. And I think that really is just the best way that I can describe the M2 Ultra Mac Studio. It's the computer that allows me to juggle a 9-to-5 graphic design gig and create content on YouTube as well as social media on the side. And it's just the rock and the home to everything that I do. This computer has allowed me to try new things and reach new heights and express my creativity in ways that no Intel Mac could ever do. And I'm just excited to see how far I can push this computer, or really better yet, see how far this computer can push me. What do you think of the M2 Ultra Mac Studio, or really just the Mac Studio in general? But also drop a comment and share when's the last time a piece of tech truly made an impact on your life. That's it for me. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.